Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to the Islamic Vibes podcast. I'm your host Majid, and today I'm joined by my guests, special guests, brother Mehdi and brother Elyas. Assalamu alaikum, brothers, and welcome to the show.
Walaikum
عليكم
salam wa
السلام
rahmatullah.
ورحمة الله وبركاته.
How are you guys
جزاك الله
doing?
خير.
Alhamdulillah. I'm
الحمد
good,
لله,
you
we're
can.
doing good.
How are you?
Yeah, alhamdulillah. Just been a bit busy. I had to attend a wedding and stuff, and just had to get back, inshallah, just to get back on this podcast, as we've had this planned for a while, and it's an important topic we're going to speak about anyway. But other than that, all good my side. You guys enjoying the weather?
It's been
Alhamdulillah.
alright. Yeah,
Rain's a blessing from Allah,
of
so
course.
Alhamdulillah.
Oh, is it
Yeah.
raining now? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Did you get much snow?
We did a little bit, but not as much.
Yeah,
It
little.
melted quite fast.
Okay. Well, yeah, we got quite a bit, but you generally do up north. But just to make it clear to those people who are watching this podcast, obviously, brother Ilyas has some technical issues, so he's unable to share his video. But inshallah, we will be definitely hearing from him loud and clear. On that note, guys, I think we should get into the topic, and the topic is a really important one, and we want to discuss today about youth generally, and how people should, focus and give quite a lot of importance to their youth. As we know in Islam, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in a famous hadith when he was talking about take advantage of 5 over the other 5, we know that one of the categories that he mentioned was take advantage of your youth before old age. So this is a phase in the life of people which is really important, and Islam should play a big role for Muslims, certainly in their youth. And also Islam does see the youth as a important section of their life, certainly when it comes to obedience, disobedience, and so on, because as we'll discuss more in the podcast, that your actions maybe carry more value when you're young. So guys, I wanted to do this topic, and I thought, I know some young brothers, you guys in your early 20s, so I want to get you guys on, get your thoughts on stuff. So I mean, the first question really I want to ask, and I'll start off with you, Brother Mehdi, that we live in a materialistic, capitalist, liberal society, and we see that there are many challenges that the younger people are facing at this moment in time. And here, to be honest with you, it might not necessarily be only Muslims. Generally, we know that youth, whether they're non-Muslims, are also finding it very difficult to adapt to how quick things are going on, how quick society is changing, and so on. And one thing I want to give you an example of before I come to you is, I have a friend who's an optom, and he was telling me that before they check their patients, they have to go through like a bit of a health check, and he was shocked to see how many young people basically put down on the sheet that they are on antidepressants. So we can see that people are being affected. Young people are affected in this time of confusion and so on. So just open up the discussion about the Mehdi. What's it like, man? What sort of challenges that youth are feeling in today's society, man?
Yeah, so you said a lot there, and there is a lot to be said. So you did describe society as capitalistic, materialistic, and liberal, and that's true. First of all, let's look at capitalism and the problems of what comes with capitalism. One of the biggest problems of capitalism is greed, meaning that everyone wants to make profit, and everyone likes the sense of profit. Yeah, which is fine, no problem. However, it's getting to a point where people are unable to do the basics. For example, there's a massive emphasis in society today that we must do education. However, for you to proceed with your education, you must go to university. And looking at university today, it's 9,000, and I think it's 9.5k a year, something around that anyways.
Yeah,
And
so it's about that. Yeah, you're right.
yeah, which is crazy. Like, a lot of people of today cannot afford that. this also leads to materialism. Because profit and greed is such a big thing, people want more. And of course, it makes it easier for the rich to increase their wealth, and it makes it more difficult for those who perhaps screw up in a council state, difficult for them to progress. So it's quite difficult in the sense of wealth for people to um, increase their wealth or even education to gain some knowledge. Um, because everything has a price mark on it. Looking at liberal society, there's a lot of things happening in society today which we can consider as liberal. For example, the LGBT movement. I feel that it's being forced down people's throats. So what I mean by that, if you go to primary school, it's a necessary factor for a child to learn about LGBT. Um, and personally, me, I don't think that should be done at this current moment. It seems like everyone must follow the new trends, and that religion is just something that's in the past. And I feel like what society is coming today, it's either you could either go two ways, is that you could become extremely liberal or you get hated for it, which it's I feel like it's unfair.
Yeah, yeah, no, exactly. Anything you want to add, Ilyas, to that?
Yeah, so I think the reason that a large portion of the youth um, become depressed is because of a lack of satisfaction of our instincts. And so, well, specifically, it's our instinct of religiousness. Um, I believe that. So, if our problem, the man's greatest problem, these questions that we ask, every single individual asks from when they are young, where did we come from? Where are we going to go? Where are we going to end up? These kind of fundamental questions, um, they don't they don't know the answer to them in a
Mm.
clear manner. And so if you don't have the correct answer to these questions, then you end up not knowing your purpose in life. And so you divert. So even though this person may be a Muslim, they may not understand their purpose in a, with clarity. And therefore they end up diverting in life and not worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore they end up spending their time and attempting to fulfill their purpose in other ways, such as earning money, etc. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, sure. I mean, from what I understood is the fact that a lot of people are lost today because of the fact that they don't understand their purpose in life. Like you mentioned, what was built up before life, what's after life, what am I doing here? So if people don't have a purpose in life, then really who decides what their purpose is? It's generally going to be the society, isn't it? And as Mehdi mentioned, if the society is pushing materialism and it's all about having everything and greed and so on, then I guess maybe the only purpose one can kind of like arrive at is that, yeah, you know what, life must be about living life to the max, and as long as I get everything that I want, enjoy life, have a nice car, have a nice house, then that's what it must be. And but the problem is not everyone gets that, do they? So if you don't get that and that's your only purpose in life, then it's no surprise that people may, fall into crime. They may fall into, depression and, all sorts, because like you're saying, that purpose is missing. Have I understood that? Have I understood you correctly, Ilyas?
Yeah, 100%. And it's also I feel like the society has been built in a way so that um in order to survive in this kind of society, you need to constantly be earning money. Like the income tax is crazy. You have inheritance tax, car insurance, um, road tax, council tax. You're taxed from all different directions, and cost of living is high. It's there's no space for you to breathe. And so this is another thing which has distracted the youth, I believe. And they see their parents struggling, and so they wish to live differently to how they were brought up and how they see their parents living.
Mm. So, you know, would you say that's exclusive to non-Muslims? Because as or do you think that actually many Muslims are also falling into this trap as well?
I don't believe it's exclusive to non-Muslims
Mm. Because the thing is,
because
if you think about it, generally, you know, we talked about purpose in life. Surely most Muslims understand from a young age, or are told anyway, have, you know, that there's a Jannah, there's a Jahannam, and you know, you need to be a good person. You need to, you know, make sure you stay away from bad things and do the good things, and then after this life, you will then be, you know, either sent to Jannah or sent to Jahannam. So that purpose is I mean, it's quite clear, isn't it, in regards to for a Muslim's point of view. But you make a valid point, Ilyas. We do see that Muslims are also affected by this. So why do you think that is?
I think there's a difference between having knowledge about Jannah and Jahannam and actually implementing these ideas in your everyday life. For example, um, you may know that Allah is the one who provides, but you may take it to the extreme, or that may remain as an idea and a thought. You don't actually implement it. Your actions don't actually reflect that, and you work day and night, and believing that you have to work this many hours in order to attain your rizq, when in reality, Allah has determined it for you already, and you do not have to work all day and all night in order to attain it.
So what you're saying is there's obviously an issue with understanding.
Yeah, it's an issue of there's an issue of understanding. So it's incorrect understanding of rizq, which leads people into um, using up all their time in order to attain their rizq, when they should be in reality um, limiting it and focusing time on studying Islam, for example.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's true. That's true. And that's the thing, isn't it? What it really boils down to is what drives people. I mean, from you guys, I mean, obviously you're in your early 20s and stuff. And Alhamdulillah, you know, you guys are trying to stick to the Deen, you know, trying to do what's right. But I'm sure you've got friends and, you know, around the same age, even younger, you got relatives who um are maybe finding it difficult to try to be on the straight path. Do you think that's purely down to distractions in regards to wanting the dunya at the expense of Aakhira, even though they don't make that conscious decision, because obviously nobody wants to give up Jannah or going to Jahannam. However, do you think that they prioritize the pleasure and the delights of the dunya over worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and attaining his you know his pleasure?
Um, yeah, so that's actually a really good point, and I feel like when it comes to individuals, it was somewhere in the timeline. So it might have not necessarily, for example, let me say I wasn't really that practicing, right? And I was so focused on this dunya, but I never made that decision, right? So what I'm trying to say with that is that even though I never made that decision and I'm behaving like that, somewhere in the timeline or the family trees, it was decided we're gonna focus on. Well, this is how I say it, we're gonna focus on work, we're gonna focus on education, so on, right? And the Deen was somewhat lost, yeah. And because that was the work effort of one person, it moved down to the next person, moved down to the next person, and eventually it moved down to me. So when it came to me and my upbringing, it would have possibly been the case where I saw my parents work, they emphasized education and that I need to work and get a good, well-paid job. And I feel like, yes, it is the expense of the deen that you work for this dunya. So I feel like that is the case for many people, but as well as at the same time, like I said, because I never made that decision, it's also the same time the problem is that I'm not aware that there's greater issues. For example, the afterlife, the rewards and the punishments, day of judgment, and so on.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's the thing, isn't it? Because there's a saying that people have a laugh about it, but it's quite deep. Where people talk about how if you have a really bright child or son, the parents will send him to university, and if you have one who's academically not great, they'll say, okay, Putter, you're going to madrasa. Do you know what I mean? Because it's to do
Exactly.
with priorities, isn't it?
Exactly.
And I think personally, when I was growing up, and there was, from your parents, there was an emphasis on buying a house, even though it may have been with a mortgage, and and always you were compared, you're given comparisons to, your this cousin's got this and your that cousin's got that. And at that time, I used to think to myself that actually, I think there's also a problem here of what do we actually um, describe as being successful? Because what I used to gauge is that, being like, so having your own house, having your car, having your nice car, having respect in the community, even for the parents. For example, if you became a doctor, especially Asians, right? They all want their children to be doctors or lawyers, right? Is almost like for them it was a badge of like honor, that, oh yeah, look at this guy, his children, they made it. Now it could be that the child doesn't become a doctor or a lawyer, however, he's got a normal job, right? But he's on his deen. There'll still be a level of disappointment in the parents, because again, well, how are they judging what's successful and what isn't? And I think that's also a big issue as well. Right now, I mean, you guys, obviously, it's the YouTube era, TikTok era, you know what I mean? Like now, a lot of youth, when you speak to them and you ask them about role models and who are your role models, a lot of the time it's online personalities. But what type of online personalities are we talking about? It's the guys who have made it, the guys who are showing their Lambo and showing their Bugatti and showing their house and their, all the jewelry they're wearing. So to a lot of people, we think that actually success is in all of these things. However, what we fail to acknowledge is that in reality, success really is in the Aakhira, man. It's being told, you go into Jannah. You know what I mean? That
Yeah.
is what success is. But people have got it a bit. They've got it mixed up.
No, I completely agree. Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you that success is the Akhirah. And it is part of the Islamic Aqidah that we need to concentrate on the Akhirah. Um, However, we also forget that I'm going to move slightly away from the topic of success, but I feel like Muslims of today somewhat forget that there's more than just Akhirah, and that's part of our Aqidah. So when we're looking at Aqidah, we're looking at govern the afterlife. So as we're talking about the Akhirah, their judgment, rewards, punishment, and so on. But we also have to look at what we do in this life, because part of our Aqidah is the affairs of today's life. And yes, like the example you said, one kid will go to university and one kid will go madrasa. We have to understand though, even though we have our deen, we still have to work and practice and so on. We have to be part of the society and part of the economy. So there's more than just practicing, putting our head down on the floor or making dua and so on, because we also have a role in society that we need to fulfill. And I feel like if you could practice your deen, be happy with yourself where you are, and still do what you need to do in this dunya, I feel like that's success, because you're fulfilling all the roles that you was expected to complete.
Yeah, but the thing is though, when you're talking about success, I see what you're saying, right? But Allah tells us that this life is a test, isn't it?
Of course, of course.
Ideally, look, nobody wants hardships on themselves, right? No one says, "Oh, Allah, give me hardships," right? That would be the wrong type of dua to ask, right?
Yeah,
But we know that there will be tests. People, Muslims will be
of
tested.
course.
So
I just
the issue is this is why I'm saying, like, there's more to this the discussion of contentment and success and tranquility, because if you are actually doing what needs to be done according to Sharia, but actually to do with, based on how people are living, you're probably having a hard time. But maybe that person can still sleep at night content
yes.
that I'm going through these trials and tribulations, yeah. But it's for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I didn't even disagree with what you were saying earlier in
Mm.
terms of that. It's pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and so on, which because it is true, that is the main goal. But I feel like when we say such things, I feel like today's youth, especially the youngers, which I see out in the streets and so on, they think that's the only goal in this life, just the akhirah, which is correct, but they just act upon that one thought. They don't. They
So
don't.
what's wrong? Because to be honest with you, I'll be straight with you, right? If there were people, Muslims, who felt like their only goal in this life is to get to Akhirah, right? I would see that as an amazing
Of
positive
course,
point,
it
right?
is. It
But
is.
but what are you saying though? So are you saying that these guys are just like trying to meditate and just float off the ground or something and expect?
Exactly.
Do you actually
Exactly.
really do you get people like that?
I do see people I see a lot of people like that, and it's a massive personally, I've seen a lot of people like that, and it's a massive misunderstanding. I've seen brothers where they would quit their job because they want to spend more time in the mosque. Well, what like it's great. Don't get me wrong. Like I see what you're doing and why you're doing it, but you also have a role in the society that you need to fulfill. And I agree with what they're doing and what they're saying and so on. But once again, as for example, when I said brothers, they're brothers that need to provide, and they have their own obligations to fulfill, and they don't understand that later on they will have more obligations placed upon them once they're married and so on.
Yeah, the issue is balance.
Exactly, exactly. That's what it is.
Like, you wouldn't overwork, but you also wouldn't not work at all.
Exactly.
And you would understand the concept of rizq as well.
Yeah. When we look at rizq and so on, we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has predetermined our rizq, our provisions. Yeah, so people understand that our wealth and our everything that's provided to us is given from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But you also have to understand that you have to create circumstances for Him to provide for you. For example, for Him to give you food on a plate, you need to be working, you need to make money, have a way of income so He could provide you food on a plate, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say that to do the issue to the rizq is, as you said, rizq is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, whether there are people who might not work, but they still get money, they still get food on the plate. But I think that the point is having the belief that rizq is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And why I think that's important in this context, what we're talking about, guys, is because, when we're talking about challenges that we see in society now, and for Muslims, and I'm not sure if you guys have come across this, but I guess there's going to come a time where you will, where you're obviously living in a land where the Sharia is absent, right? It's and it's a Dar al Kufr, it's a non-Islamic land, and it's predominantly non-Muslim. So what you're going to experience is there's going to come times where in work, where you're going to be put in a sticky situation where, as an example, just say you worked in a certain profession, and your manager said, look, on Fridays, I can't afford to let you go out at this time for Jummah, right? I mean, to be honest with you, generally you don't have this problem, but I'm just saying, right? Or just say to a sister, they said, we really like you, we think we've got it what it takes, but the dress code, we would prefer if you didn't wear the jilbab and the khimar, for example, right? So there's gonna come times where now you need to decide what you're gonna do. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's something which I think most people are going to experience how do you tackle it, and that's the main thing, because at that moment in time, the risk is important, because the one who understands this, and going back to Ilyas's point about Aqeedah and understanding your purpose in life, right? If you're convinced, not just that you were told by your parents or you just heard the Imam say on Friday that rizq's from Allah, that you're convinced of rizq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yeah, then you will turn around and say, I'm sorry, I can't do this. I have to dress in this way. Or you'll say, look, I will work an extra hour every single day, Monday to Thursday, but on Friday, I need this availability because I need to go to the mosque. And if you're not in that, if that's not the case, then I'm not taking this job. And not taking the job can bring difficulties, right? It could bring difficulties. But where this concept kicks in is that the person will be content that my rizq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and my rizq is not going to increase by disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right?
100%.
And I think that's why there's certain things like rizq is important, because a lot of people, maybe challenges, maybe their issues at home or whatever it is, but we do see people who will do things which they know is not right, and they would normally not want to do them, but they do them because they fear that I'm going to get sacked or I'm not going to get a promotion or stuff like this.
Yeah, I actually see that quite a lot, if I'm being honest, and it's quite common in today's society. You see brothers where they're in the same exact problem where they have a job, they also have Friday Salah to go to, and they don't know which one to go for. And I agree with what you're saying. I feel like there's a time and place where you need to consider where this takes place, and is money your main motivation, or is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And it's a massive question of today's society, like today's youth. And yes, we do need to protect Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And yes, we need to do what he tells us to do and practice what we need to practice. Saying that, what we do outside of our Deen, it should only be done where it does not interfere with our religion.
What do you mean? Break that down.
So for example, making money, working a job, going to university, so on, right? It should only be done where it does not interfere your salah and your obligations. So, like you said, Friday salah is an obligation for man to attend, right? So, a person should not pick up a job if a job makes them incapable of going to that Friday salah. And for example, a sister, the Sharia says that a sister should be covering up completely, like you said, khimar or jilbab. So if a job says that she's not allowed to wear these sort of clothing, I feel like they should not be working at such jobs, because once again, it's either Allah or Dunya. So yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying, and it is a sticky topic. But I feel like it all comes down to how the individual is with the Imam and so on, and do they have faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
So I think Ilyas was touching on it earlier, and maybe you can elaborate on it. So do you think it's like maybe a lot of people have, the kind of Muslim because they were born in a Muslim family. Obviously, they do really believe in it. However, they've probably not really thought about it themselves in a critical way. Like, is this actually the truth or not? And maybe that's why they do believe in all of these things, but they can behave like their behavior reflects something different.
Yeah, so as with that topic, when you're trying to become practicing and so on, the best way of becoming practicing is knowledge. If you have knowledge on Islam, your concepts build stronger and stronger, and you tend to build a strong relation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you're practicing and so on. And yeah, I feel like a lot of people today that are born Muslim don't really know what Islam is. I mean that they don't have the concepts, or they don't understand the concepts, or don't have the knowledge, so they don't really practice it as much, if that makes sense. And it once again goes to the idea is that you're either imam or you're just a regular Joe, you know? And sorry, it was you.
No, I was agreeing with you, man. Go for
Oh,
it.
okay. Yeah, and yeah, exactly. I somewhat lost track, if I'm being honest.
No worries. But you know, okay, so at the moment, then, would you say that um, with a lot of the youth that are probably not doing what they need to do from a Deen point of view, right? Because there is awareness now about Islam being more than just five pillars. I think like when I was growing up, I'm not going to mention what decade that is, right? But when I was growing up, right, honestly, it was like Islam was five pillars. And in school, you were taught this, and it wasn't even a Muslim that was teaching it. And you'd go to the mosque, and all you'd receive is like, lick shots with a stick. You know what I mean? You'd learn Arabic, you'd learn the Quran in a very parrot fashion where you never really understood it, right? Um, but now, look, definitely, man, there's more awareness about Islam, right? It's very common for people to say, "Oh, Islam is a way of life," and and what they mean by that is that, look, it's not just like your personal worships; it's to do with how you live your life. So I think that's known now, right? So, what's stopping Muslims the most in regards to as a challenge? Is it the fact that they just are overwhelmed by just wanting to, really, you know, live this life, perfect life that the society is pushing? Or do you think there's elements where Muslims are like a bit concerned because, we got prevent, you got all these like this demonization of Islam going down, right? Is there some people like they don't want to start practicing and we're not just talking about praying and stuff. I want to expand to your point, Mehdi, where you talk about Islam is more than just praying. It's about how you live your complete life in society, right? So do you think it's a mix of both, or do you think there's more fear, or do you think it purely is the fact that people just, their whims and desires are just taking priority in trying to have a perfect life and trying to maximize, the pleasures?
Yeah, so let's look at that. So first you mentioned that school and a non-Muslim teacher teaching Islam. With that, yeah, that's a very common case, and a lot of people that don't actually look into Islam themselves, they tend to have such a surface level understanding of what Islam is. And I'm talking about the Muslims. So you
So
see,
this is from your guys' personal experience. So
yeah, yeah.
you think even when people say, even youngsters say Islam is a way of life, do you think it's just a slogan where they don't really know what it means?
100%.
Yeah,
So yeah, so let me elaborate on that. And like I said, people don't understand what the two aspects of Aqidah. So um, when people say they're Muslim, and like I said, some Muslims don't understand what Islam is. So when people start looking into Islam, they only come across the spiritual aspect of Islam. So the spiritual aqidah. So that's when you see them super practicing. They always have their trousers rolled up and so on, right? You see these sort of people, and like I said, they don't really understand that they have a role to play in society, and they also have to do other things. And then look on the other side of Muslims, we're looking at Muslims that don't really understand what Islam is. They're due to the capitalist society, they're extremely materialistic. They just want to work, and they don't really care about the deen as much, unfortunately. Um, and I've personally, I've seen these two distinctions, and it's very clear and very vivid in society that there are these two distinctions. And unfortunately, it's not that common to see people that understand both aspects. But Alhamdulillah, today's society, due to TikTok, so on, eh, our society where Muslims understand both aspects is growing.
So in what sense do you mention TikTok and stuff? Do you mean like because of people generating more awareness about it?
Yeah, exactly. So that's one thing, like because some people have understanding that there's two aspects of Aqidah. They spread these ideas and concepts across on platforms like TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and today's social media is a big thing for the youth. So if you're spreading awareness on these platforms, you do see these concepts quite a lot. But the only problem is that I feel like with these platforms, there's a lot of differentiation in different. There's a lot of difference in opinion, and that's why I feel like individuals also need to understand that they need to look at the scholars they follow and so on.
Yeah. Elyas, you want to add anything on that, bro?
I think there's been an intellectual decline that has started like a couple of centuries ago, whereby the ideas and concepts of Islam they've been undermined and attacked. And the reason so is to specifically is to is to make sure that the Muslims accept these Western ideas and concepts easily and they embrace them. And so, and embracing these Western concepts and ideas, this is what caused this intellectual decline and the lack of understanding of Islam. And it placed, and the response, the Ummah's response was not the correct response. It was a response whereby they were placed on the defensive and they were, I'll give you an example. So for example, the Sharia rules were attacked and undermined. So for example, it was said that how can you marry more than one woman?
Mm.
And it was said that how can you have one leader? Because the excuse was that this person is subject to error. So how can you have one person as your leader? Meaning they're comparing it to democracy, whereby they have many people who are ruling. And so the Ummah did not respond in the correct way. And instead they made excuses for Islam, for the rules of Islam. And over time, the the Ummah's knowledge, it decreased and there were less mujtahideen in society. And so even basic concepts like rizq, for example, and ajal, lifespan, we no longer understood them with clarity, which is a basic Islamic requirement. And so this is where issues came across later on, like what you mentioned, like a punishment for a child would be to go to madrasa, whereas that should not be the case. So the parent is lacking basic Islamic understanding and basic Islamic concepts and treating it as a punishment for the child and not a priority. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but would you not say though that obviously the 100%, I totally agree with you. If you look at the 1400 years plus of Islam, obviously Islam it peaked and then there was a decline. But the fact that Muslims now, many Muslims around the world do see Islam as more than just something which is a set of rituals, just something which is a spiritual religion. That this is showing that Alhamdulillah, thanks to all praise to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we see that Muslims are now trying to reattach themselves to the correct understanding of Islam. I mean, look, just I'll give you an example. I don't have to go any further than this podcast. The fact that you guys, I'm going to give you guys as an example here, right? You're living in the West, secular society, materialistic, liberal. However, there's something that's kept you on the Deen. Do you know what I mean? Like Like you're going through the same institutions, you're going through the same schools, right? You got friends called Steve and Bob and Harry, you know what I mean, right? Why is it that you haven't, why is it that we haven't followed in the footsteps of the Sikh immigrants and the Hindu immigrants and the West Indian immigrants, where they left behind their cultures and they became, the same, where you had, Sukhjit, he became Simon, you know what I mean? They've done that, but in fact, it shows that, that awareness, that revival, I would say, for Islam and for people's yearning for Islam to govern their lives is, I would say, it's on the return, because we do see this, man, and obviously, I would think that within the youth, look, no one's saying that everyone is wanting this, but generally, I think that there's more awareness today. How many people are acting upon it is debatable. Like, it's like that people know Islam is more than what they think, but they think, later on in life, I'll go and do Hajj and I'll sort myself out. But there's definitely more of an awareness now. And then another example is ISIS, for example. Like when ISIS came on the scene, right? I personally believe one of the reasons why it was done so by the West was so that Muslims generally think, wow, this is Khilafah? Bloody hell, we don't want nothing to do with this. This can stay in the 7th century in the books, history books, right? But they didn't.
100%.
They didn't. Even those imams who used to squeeze them to get the word Khilafah out, these guys were coming out and saying, nah, this is not Khilafah. Khilafah is the time of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, Umar radiallahu anhu. This is not Khilafah, right? So, you can see that maybe 60, 70 years ago, the reaction of the Ummah might have been different. It might have been like, wow, nah, we don't want any part of this, man. Look at this, like, barbaric type of system where they're burning people in cages and, they got people locked in cars and they're firing a RPG at it. Those guys did the most extreme type of violence that you only see in these horror movies, right? But I think it was for a reason, to really get people to get put off by this idea, but alhamdulillah, it never happened. So I would say that there's 100%, Elyas, I agree with you. There was a decline, and I'm not saying that has been overcome. And what we're seeing today, and I think actually what the point you're making is the fact that some of the behaviors we do see today in Muslims is linked to that same decline that was set in hundreds of years ago.
Definitely.
Yeah, Mehdi.
I completely agree with what you're saying. I feel like we are still in the same decline, and I do see with what you're saying. Is there a gradual incline in knowledge? And it's a yes and no answer. Yes, because people want to learn more about the religion. But is the knowledge that's available, that's easily available on TikTok and so on, is it the correct knowledge? That's the question. And it's a difficult question because we have so many different things mixing in with Islam, unfortunately. And as we know, that Islam is an ideology that stands by itself. So when you hear stuff like red pill Islam or feminist Islam and so on, it's not Islam, right? And people are getting misled by this. So I feel like when we're talking about decline and incline, I feel like we're still on a decline. We're still on a decline, even though people are looking more into Islam. And I feel like it's unfortunate that they're getting misinformed about Islam because there's so many different ideologies that people are trying to mix in.
Okay, so would you not say another way of putting that is the fact that, because remember decline, if we let's look at a chart.
Yeah, okay.
So it's going down, it's going down, it's going down, right? It kind of hits rock bottom where people have kind of disconnected Islam with politics, disconnected Islam with society. They see it as purely rituals, right? Okay. But the fact that now people see Islam as more than that, surely that curve is going up. Now, the fact that, what does Shaitan do? Shaitan ain't gonna go on vacation in Switzerland, right? Because he thinks I've done the job. He's thinking, yo, okay, look, these people are trying to get back at it. What do I do? Let me generate more confusion. And I think this is the point you're making, the fact that now They know people want to learn more. Okay, are we gonna just leave them to their own devices to find the truth, or are we gonna blur it for them? And I think that's what we're seeing, and that puts even more responsibility on people who claim to understand Islam correctly to be more vocal, because you need to drown these voices that are there. Like you said, I mean, you got these guys who are given platforms, these online scholars and stuff like that, right? Some of them, I think there's kind of like even no question marks on them, right? But others say good things, but then they'll creep in somewhere. It's very clever how it's done, right? They'll creep in somewhere. But this is what you're saying. It's to cause this confusion. So a lot of people are thinking, yeah, you know what? We want to live our life according to Islam. But then at the same time, you got people who are like these scholars, online scholars, saying things like, just worry about yourself, just worry about your own community. Don't think about the Muslims in other lands, right? So you're getting this, like you're getting a reaction, and then you're getting a counter reaction.
Yeah.
But the scary thing is, and I think this is the important point, and I this is what I think we're trying to say, is that if there's a revival happening, if this revival is misdirected, then it's only going downhill again.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know what I mean? So I think that's why it's at a critical point.
Yeah.
All the energy that there's there to try to understand Islam. I mean, I'll give you an example, man. Look, if you disagree, then just say so, right? But when we think about in the Muslim lands, right, any kind of politician who wants to get votes, why do they have to play the Islamic card? So you've not got a guy who's saying, I'm going to stand as your local imam. You got a guy who's saying, I'm going to stand as your local MP, or I'm going to stand as the president. Why do like the most hardcore CHP secretary Ataturk Kemalists in Turkey, right, have to try to show that they are like praying salah and stuff like this? It shows there's a sentiment amongst the people that, in fact, they want Islam to be more. Okay, I don't think that they have a real crystallized understanding of what it's supposed to be. But the fact that they want the guys who are like in politics, managing their affairs, to be Islamic for a start. They want their wives to have a headscarf on for a start. Do you know what I mean? It shows that the sentiments are growing towards Islam, and I'm sure the youth have to be involved in. And the reason why I say that, I think 70, correct me if I'm wrong, 70% of the Ummah's population is, I think, under 20 or something really
30.
Under 30.
I believe.
Under 30, yeah.
So that's a lot of youth. You know what I mean? That's a lot of youth. So Alhamdulillah, it's probably showing something that's, that we are moving in the right direction. But I think that the more closer we try to get to our objective, I think the kuffar will double down and work even harder.
100%. I feel like also it seems like there's been a watering down of Islam,
Big time.
whereby Islam is being restricted to the spiritual aspect, whereby you're just going to the masjid, praying, fasting, making dua, and that's about it. When in reality, Islam is a complete way of life that includes all systems of life. I feel like it's a deliberate attempt to ensure that the Ummah do not think outside of this, meaning it's as if they do not want the Muslims to realize that Islam is more than just Salah, for example, and fasting, 5 pillars. And therefore,
I think what they do, Elyas, just sorry to interrupt you there, just to come back to you, because I want to give an example of what you're saying there. I think what they want to do is they will accommodate wherever possible, right? Like, for example, they will bring out Islamic finance. They will bring out Islamic mortgages, right? Wherever a person feels a bit like agitated, like, man, I can't even buy a house in this country because it's got interest. Okay, yeah, but haven't you, get an Islamic mortgage? Then you don't need to look elsewhere. I think that they will accommodate where they can to, this is my personal opinion, to keep people distracted from seeing the need for the Islamic State, the
100%.
Khilafah.
I
They will
agree.
accommodate they'll build you mosques, they will do all these things as long as, right, you don't want, the alternative isn't Khilafah. So, like you're saying, they'll keep you in this box, right? And they'll do this and that, they will be flexible, but you can't come out of this box. You can't want anything more than what they're offering you.
Definitely. It's like they always portray the wrong solution. Always. It's like the oppression of our brothers and sisters in the world, in Palestine, for example, in Syria, Libya, etc. Um, the solution that is portrayed is, you hear it every Jumu'ah, is dua. But the question is, of course, dua is very powerful, but do you just sit around and make that, or does action need to be involved? That's an important question.
You know what I would say on that one,
Yeah,
Elyas, and then I get Mehdi's thoughts on it. Yeah, is it's the dua is a weapon. You hear that a lot, yeah.
yeah,
But the dua, right? Does when you're talking about something that has real life implications, right? So just say my dua was, oh Allah, I want to become a F1 driver, right? Oh Allah, I want to become an F1 driver. However, I know that still I'm gonna say, oh Allah, I hope I pass my test. Oh Allah, i.e. basically there's milestones, right? Because you're not just gonna come from 0 to 60, as in like 0 to F1 driver purely from dua, in the sense like there are steps that need to happen. There's things that you need to learn. You need to how to drive an F1 car, etc., right? But here, when people talk, and you gave an example of Syria and stuff like this, when people say you make dua, 100%, no one can knock that. However, that dua, is it a dua where it's just once a week at a Jummah? Shouldn't we be asking that dua like more often, right? And secondly, shouldn't the dua be like something like, oh Allah, make the Muslims capable of restoring their izzah, restoring their honor. Oh Allah, make increase the knowledge of the ummah. You know what I'm trying to say? Like making dua linked to things that need to change in order for that actual problem to go away. But what we tend to do is it's just like 0 to 60. It's like, oh Allah, remove the issue in Syria. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says He doesn't change the condition of people until they don't work to change it themselves, right? So why are we expecting Allah to do all the work? Basically, is what I'm saying.
100%.
So you know what I mean? So even then, I think you're right. But what I think is that the more, not dangerous one, I think the different solution or the path that of Muslims are, and especially the youth, I see that are being taken down now, is down the route of charities. Because
I was going to mention that earlier, actually.
yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so earlier you mentioned the Muslims' efforts are exerted, and then it reminded me that it seems like the Muslims' efforts are directly diverted into false solutions, such as charity. So, charity, for example, giving money to Palestine, it does not remove that oppression, because the Israelis, they're just going to continue to kill our brothers and sisters. Therefore, charity, it does not remove that oppression. So all you're doing is exerting your efforts into something and feeling a sense of accomplishment, whereby it does not, in reality, change the situation.
Yeah, and I think that's why I think people are not just, and alhamdulillah, this is actually a good sign. People are not just content on making dua, they do make dua, but then they'll do things like you're saying. So they'll get involved in the charities and stuff like, which, look, their intentions are noble. Their intentions are noble. They want to help them. There's a sense of ummah. The kuffar who drew these lines, these borders in our lands, they haven't been able to remove this sense of ummah that Muslims have. So they want to do something, right? But this is where they've been channeled down different routes. And one of the routes is charity. And charity in itself, i.e. giving sadaqah itself, is not an issue. But when you have done it and you think, actually, I've done my bit for the people there, it's like a tick box in the sense, like you feel like you've achieved something. But the main point is that 10 years later, there's people in the same situation. So it's definitely not a solution. What I would say is that Muslims should look to help their brothers and sisters. However, if we acknowledge that this isn't the solution, then surely we should exert a bit of effort to try to think, well, what is the solution? But I see a lot of youngsters, man. But again, like I said, look, I still see that as a positive. Going back to this issue of Muslims doing the wrong things. When it's these type of things, I see the positives in the fact that Muslims care, man. Yeah. If they didn't care, that would be a problem. Like if Muslims were like, listen, I've got £2.50 in my pocket, but I'd rather spend it on a doner kebab, right, than sending it off to my brothers and sisters who are more needy than me. I would say there's a bigger problem. So here you see, here's the delicate times now, the sort of like really blurry lines of where the Muslims are being played. If I'm going to be honest, the Muslims are being played. And I think where they lack sometimes is we can be very emotional, but that political awareness that we need to have.
100%.
I think that's where we lack. And that's why we will keep doing those things which actually don't bring about any real change. And was it Einstein who said the first sign of madness is it like repeating something and expecting a different results?
I've heard that.
Yeah, there's a saying like the like it's madness where someone does the same action expecting different results every time. And the hadith on the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he said that the believer is not stung from the same hole twice, right? If you actually look in the hadith, the context is political because of the situation that actually was surrounding when the hadith came about, right? But I think because we don't have that political awareness, what we will see is that we will easily be directed, or shall I say misdirected, right? And because we're emotional, because we want to do something for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we want to do something for the ummah, we go with it without actually maybe applying a bit of thought to it, which is probably more difficult if I'm going to be honest. Like really sit down and think. Charities have been around for years. Lobby groups have been around for years. Petitions have been going around for years. You're lobbying your MP or going to UN is going around for years. In fact, all those crises, all those conflicts that we're talking about have actually become worse, right? You look at Palestine as an example. When these lot came out with this two-state solution thing, right? Some people bought into it. But all it did was stall the Muslims, because now Muslims have less of that two-state that it actually had when they friggin' announced it. You'd think it would go the other way. The Golan Heights, you had UN peace observers there, right? And then all of a sudden America says, yeah, it's part of Israel. So what were those UN peacekeepers doing there? In fact, they were stopping the Muslims from retaking it. It's stuff like this, man. We need to really think out of the box. And some of the examples really, and linking it to the issue of youth, man, is if you look at the time of the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and if you look at some of the the companions, Sahaba, some of the first companions that sort of rallied around his cause, they were from the youth, man. They were I noticed some names down. Ali ibn Abi Talib, radiyallahu anhu, he was like 8 years old. Zubair ibn al-Awwam was 8. Talha ibn Ubaidullah, he was 11. Al-Arqam ibn Abi al-Arqam, 12 years old. Abdullah ibn Masud, 14 years old. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, 17 years old. Jafar ibn Abi Talib, 18 years old. You understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
So these were actually, we saw in the past that the youth were the driving force for change, man. Yeah? The youth. And that's why there's no surprise, guys. No surprise. The enemies of Islam, they're targeting the youth. They're targeting the youth because if they can misdirect them, then that change occurs in the wrong way. Just look at what's happening in Saudi, for example, man. You know, let's not try to brush things under the carpet and try to ignore that it's not happening. But listen, they're having raves out there where you got like 750,000 people turning up to them. To say that a lot of the youth are not being influenced and not that they're not liking it, they are liking it, right? They're liking these raves and stuff like that. So they're being misdirected. So right now, the issue is that the youth, that generation is either going to be a movement for change in a positive sense, or actually it can be the reverse. Because if that generation goes on the wrong path, then what about the generation after? What about the generation after? And that's why they target the youth, man. That's why they're targeting people your age, people younger. And, you know, Mehdi, you mentioned about the stuff they're teaching in schools now. They're going down to friggin' like 4, 5, 6-year-olds. And why? Mate, they understand. They understand that if you want that change, actually, they've identified women and children. If you want to change the Ummah, you attack the focus on the women, you focus on the youth. And, you know, this is where you can stop the likes of, the companions from the youth to resurface and work to this change. Obviously, they're not going to be on the level of the companions. But what I'm saying is like the youngsters who want to do something. And obviously you see these challenges yourself, you know, trying to speak to people around your age and stuff like that. And some may listen, but might not want to do anything. Some people may even ignore you. It's because there's great challenges out there, man. And one thing I wouldn't like to add as well is that, you know, when we talk about Tariq bin Ziyad, you know Tariq bin Ziyad?
Yeah.
Yeah. We talk about Muhammad bin Qasim. We talk about Osama bin Zaid, right? We talk about all these companions that were young. We talk about Salahuddin al-Ayyubi. We talk about, you know, Imam Shafi'i and on all these great people that we should see as role models, right? It's no surprise that they became great at a time when they lived under Islam. That the whole society reminded them of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. From the young age through to the society, to the adhan, to the way people interacted in dealing with their transactions, their mamulat, whether it was people going to fight jihad, expanding the borders of the state. They grew up in that environment. So it has a positive effect. But now imagine now growing up in an environment where it's designed to actually move you away from thinking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or thinking about a greater purpose other than maximizing your sensual gratification, right? Is there no surprise that people will be like that? And that's why society, that's why the rules that govern society are so important, because if they're right, then the fruit that is grown from that tree will be full of life, will be fresh, will be juicy. But if it's from an ideology, which is man-made, which is not from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then how can we expect any good from it? The fruit that will go from it will be rotten. Do you know what I mean?
100%.
So guys, got another couple of questions, man. Just want to ask you guys before we kind of like bring the podcast to a close. Really, is an interesting one, right? Interesting one is why do we see men? I would say men around, you know, their early 20s or just say late 20s attracted to like people like Andrew Tate, Jordan Peterson. What is it that attracts it? Is it the fact? Is it the lifestyle, or is it what they're talking about when they're talking about like feminism and or do guys like, you know, do young men experience these problems where they're being, you know, kind of marginalized and all this like gender equality and stuff like that is causing problems? Is that what it is, or is it the Bugattis?
So it's a breath of fresh air for Muslims in terms of um it some of those ideas that have been mentioned by such people, they appeal to man's instincts in general.
Okay.
So, for example, well, currently today, because LGBT, feminism, all these kind of things, they're being pushed and they do not appeal to man's instincts. They're contradictory to man's instincts. And so when these kind of things are shunned by people who have a lot of influence, um, and they're said in a manner that is very appealing, and by people who um, also have that, you know, they're rich, etc. Because the Muslims also today they have that inclination towards earning money, so they're attracted towards these individuals because of that material aspect, as well as by what they're saying, because it's a breath of fresh air that inclines towards their instincts. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. So basically, what you're saying is that a lot of the things that are being pushed in society now, whether you're Muslim or non-Muslim, they kind of don't agree with like human nature. Is that what you?
100%, 100%. Like feminism, that's contradictory to human nature, and it's been found that after feminism and these people who these women who started this feminist movement,
Mm.
um, they regretted it later on because they realized they were unhappy because it does not correctly satisfy their instincts.
Yeah, yeah. Would you say from you guys' experiences that like Muslim young young Muslim women and stuff like, do you think they've been influenced by this all this feminism and stuff?
Uh, it's a mix. It's a mix. Like I said, you do see some sisters that are feminist Muslims, which don't understand what Islam expects of them, and they pretty much follow what feminism is teaching them, female empowerment, and so on. Um, and then you see other sisters that actually follow Islam, obliges on them. I feel like once again, you know what it is, right? I feel like feminism came at such a rush. It went into the schools and so on that everyone just in general learned more about feminism and so on over Islam. So the sisters definitely did get confused with what they have to follow and so on. And I feel like with these people online, these personalities like you've mentioned, the only reason why there's such an uproar of them is because you have this big wave of feminism, not only in the non-Muslim community but also in the Muslim community. Um, it is quite common, if I'm being honest, and it is unfortunate. But Alhamdulillah, you do see recently that it's been toning down a little bit.
Yeah. Probably it's like it's it's not outright feminism, but
Yeah,
there's like you hear sometimes, like I've heard like relatives say stuff like um it's like it just says really hot, and you're chilling in a park or somewhere, and they got the jilbab and the himar on, and they'll say like, well, at least you can wear shorts. Now, not that they want to wear shorts and they're content wearing it, but just that little bit of comment where it's like, oh, the rules are a bit different, aren't they? Like, we have to wear this, but you can, wear some, shorts and wear a vest. You understand what I'm saying? Even though they're not saying it in a bad place, but just that idea that kind of creeps in of equality. You understand? And I think that maybe varies in there. You get some people who are like outright feminists, and maybe they say things which are kufr, if I'm going to be honest with you. But it's not surprising people are going to be Muslims, young sisters will be affected by it because it's just so predominant, isn't it?
Yeah, I feel that the way that they get Muslims women to incline towards these ideas, they use Islam to do so because they
That's
know
right.
that that's the only way to get to us Muslims in general is to
Mm.
use Islam and twist it in a way so that we incline towards it. For example, they use Khadija. Um,
Okay.
they say that okay, she was a. They use
A
the fact that
businesswoman.
exactly, yeah. They use that um fact to push this idea of women empowerment, women working, etc. Well, Khadija, she also obeyed her husband, Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam.
Awesome.
So they leave certain ideas out and they um agree with others, if you see what I'm saying.
Yeah. So again, it's that mixing, and then you've got online personalities who are pushing these same ideas. I mean, I remember, I'm not going to mention names, but there was a clip of it looked like he was joking, but I don't know if he was actually if that's what he meant or he was making it a joke. But it's a guy who was saying like, if my wife tells me to sit, then I would sit there and not move. You know what I mean? Until she let me move, and like people laughing in the audience, be thinking, wait a minute, mate, that's you know what I mean? That's taking things a bit too far, yeah.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, come on, that's that, So it does play on minds, man. It's like people can be selective. It's like, you will find a clip on TikTok and stuff like that, right? Of a clip of a speech from someone, and you can kind of like tailor make it for what you're trying to say. Do you know what I mean? But again, another thing, guys. Again, it's a positive that they are trying to deviate Muslims by using Islam, because they know if they don't use Islam, it's a no go.
100%.
You
They
know what I'm
use it in
saying?
all aspects, in every little thing.
Mm.
Anything that you find is contradictory to Islam and is being pushed, or is a fundamental part of the society we live in, you'll find that Islam is being used in order for it to be accepted by the Muslim population. 100%.
Yeah, exactly, man. So one last question, man, before we bring it to a close. Yeah, when I was younger, you never used to see Muslims, or shall I say Pakistanis, or shall I say people from subcontinent Muslims wearing like the Three Lions England football tops, right? And what I noticed, man, is like over the last few years, like especially with the World Cup and stuff like this, like maybe last 10 years, is you're getting that quite a lot. Now, there's always been that question: are you British? Are you Muslim? Because they're trying to make it out clearly that you can either be one or the other. Yeah, they're not happy with you saying I'm a Muslim from Britain, right? But I'm seeing now the fact that you get a lot of people, a lot of Muslim youth that are, wearing like the England top and stuff like this. Even though if you look at it from a political point of view, what that represents is not really something that Muslims agree with, and you shouldn't be wearing it, from my
Yeah.
opinion. Yeah. So is this because obviously people who like football, they've got their own football teams that they support, and some of the players play for the national side, so that's why they do it? Or do you think, or I mean, not do you think, but maybe, from what you gauge, do like the new generation Muslims, people early 20s like yourself, even younger, do they feel like part and parcel of being British, whilst if you look at the earlier generations who came over here, they still kept the houses and stuff, and they land in Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, and all that, because they knew one day they're going back, right? So I just want to ask that from your guys, but obviously with you guys being young guys, yeah. So what is it, man? Is it people just more acceptable now, thinking that we're British and there's no issue with that?
Well, I think the question is, are we really part of the society that we live in terms of, do we hold the same ideas and concepts as everyone else? And should we hold the same ideas and concepts as everyone else? And obviously, we live, our purpose in life is to attain Jannah. And we know that um, well, there has to be a distinction between us and the disbelievers, non-Muslims. Like we can't hold the same ideas and concepts and
No.
both expect expect to end up in Jannah. So like well, raising the British flag, for example, this is it shows nationalism, doesn't it? It shows, to an extent, it could in some circumstances show nationalism, or it may just be a representation of the support for like the British team, for the England team, for example. But either way, like the fact that it could potentially show nationalism, I believe it should be stayed away from, because nationalism is not something that we hold as Muslims, because we instead we bond through the Islamic bond of brotherhood, right? And so, yeah, that's my view on that.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I mean, to be honest with you, you're preaching to the converted there in that respect. Like, I totally agree with you. Just I was trying to understand, like, it's more common now than it was before. So, and it's more common with the youngsters, and that's why I sort of asked the question if you guys had any opinion based on it. Is it like people do feel like part and parcel of this society and this country, or are they just doing it because they support the team and players within the team that play for their local teams? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mehdi, any thoughts on that?
I completely agree with what Elyas said. That we shouldn't really be identifying with whether or not we're British. But I feel like since we do live in Britain or the UK, they do want us to identify as British. For example, when you go to jobs and one, they would be asking about British values. And honestly, personally, me, I got them on the top of my head: democracy, rule of law, so on. It's like a script when people ask me about it, and it's like they, as much as you want to be a Muslim, a good Muslim, so on, the British, no matter what you go through, they want you to make sure that you identify with them. So it's a bit of a somewhat identity crisis, because you do see like a mixture of people that are proud to be British but Muslim, some that don't want to be British but love to be Muslim, and so on. And I feel like it shouldn't be a massive argument, if I'm being honest. We have to understand what was obliged on us and what our expectations are. And of course, we shouldn't discriminate just due to the fact that we have different nationalities and so on.
Yeah, no, 100%, man, 100%, guys. Cool, guys. That was a really interesting chat. Really good to get your perspectives. But as we normally do on the Islamic Vibes podcast, I want to get your like final thoughts. Anything you want to add to the discussion? Anything you want to re-emphasize? One thing I would say is what I would like you to do maybe is if there's any kind of like a message from your personal experience of still being young, still seeing this, being part of the society, still encountering the challenges other people are, but trying to stay on the Deen and stuff like this. What sort of advice would you give other Muslims and youngsters, if you want, that is. But any final thoughts, entirely up to you guys. I don't want to dictate what your thoughts are. I'll start off with you, Mehdi. Anything you want to add before we end the podcast?
The only thing I've got to say is that for the young Muslims out there, let go of ideologies, feminism, red pill, so on, and just focus on what Islam is. Look at the Sunnah, look at the example that was provided to us. You will find all the answers there.
Subhanallah. Sound advice, bro. Sound advice. Elyas, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I would just like to add to what Mehdi said. Just, don't restrict your view in terms of, don't fall into the trap of restricting Islam to what they want you to restrict it to, which is the spiritual aspect, and make sure you see Islam as a full and complete way of life. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, no, Jazakallah khair, man. Jazakallah khair. And I'd like to kind of like finish on a point really that life is short. You could speak to a 60-year-old guy and he'll say, my life went like a blink of an eye. You ask someone who's 25, they'll say the same. Time doesn't wait for anyone. And the youth is the time when we should really try to make the most of this life for the Aakhira. Because on the day of judgment, when as the narrations tell us that the sun will be, you know, almost above our heads and people will be drowning in their sweat, that there are 7 categories of individuals who will be protected under the shade of the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one of those is the youth who spent his time in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is something which is, you know, everybody would want. Everybody would want to be under the shade. And if you think about it as well, if you look at your life, and Elyas mentioned about the instincts and stuff earlier on, but when you're younger, you know, the dunya is more attractive. The desires are more attractive, right? You know, when you get older and your body changes, and you know, then you start focusing and prioritizing other instincts, right? Other satisfactions. But when you're young, that's when basically you have the energy, you have the power, you have, you know, you can be the ruler of the world. You feel like, you know, the sky's the limit. This is that stage in life. This is that stage in life when, if you do not fall to your whims and desires, but instead stand strong on the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and, you know, don't get distracted by all the desires and all the, you know, all the pleasures around you. This is the time when really you can seal your akhirah, inshallah ta'ala, right? When we get older, when all those needs and the desires have slowed down, it's easier just to like go to the mosque, go to Hajj. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%.
But the most challenging time is your youth. And I think that part of your life holds more value to your actions, because the distractions are more appealing than they are when you're 50, 60, 70. So guys, Jazakallah khair for joining me on this episode. Really benefited from this discussion. And I hope everyone who's listening or watching to this benefits as well. And if you do benefit from this, inshallah ta'ala, please share it with your family and friends. And hopefully, guys, inshallah ta'ala, maybe in the near future, we can record another episode on another interesting topic. But until then, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Barakallahu feek.